Prime Minister, thank you so much for joining us at the Year Ahead. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Very nice to be with you.
I want to begin by talking to you about the vaccination program. What is the current status of your national vaccination program, and are you happy with the pace of the rollout?
I think we are all eager to get more vaccines because we know that this is the recipe for opening up our society and bringing more normality back into our society. But I think what we are doing in Norway is that we are following the regulations that the vaccines are results are based on, meaning that we are not delaying the second dose like some countries are doing. That means that we have getting more people who are fully vaccinated, but fewer people who get their first dose. So we do this stepwise. There is always a debate whether we should do it this way or that way, but we are happy. I believe it's following. We only hope that there will be no hiccups on the way for getting more vaccines because I think everybody's getting very tired of these unnormal days that we are living in.
Oh, absolutely. Everyone is getting quite fed up right now. I want to ask you, how concerned are you about the safety of the Pfizer vaccine for elderly citizens? We know 29 people in Norway died after getting that 29 senior citizens. Are you still planning on giving this vaccine to the elderly in your country?
Yes, we are giving them to the elderly, but we are doing a little bit different in our protocols. First of all, I'd like to say we have been starting out with our elderly care homes. These are the most vulnerable, the oldest one, and we have given vaccines also to people who have been quite critically ill and old. And some of them have not been able, they get a small bit of fever that might top them over. And we don't believe there's any problem with the safety of the vaccines, but we will maybe not give them to the most vulnerable of the elderly because that might speed up a process that they were what we would say at the end of life phase anyway. So what we see is that probably is not what we will continue to do. But we also have a very, very low threshold in Norway for openness on the side effects of vaccines and medicine. So we have an open and reporting that also sometimes increases focus on side effects, but our medical authorities are not afraid of that. They say it's safe, secure, and we will maybe not give the vaccines to people who are so old that the side effect might just shorten their life a couple of weeks.
You're absolutely right. You have been very open and transparent about what happened with the Pfizer vaccine and senior citizens in your country. And there's been a huge interest in the Norway report, perhaps also due to the fact that there has been very little published data, say in the US and the UK, when it comes to the effect of these vaccines. Do you think other countries should do more, need to make more of an effort to increase transparency about their vaccination programs to encourage wider acceptance?
Well, I believe in openness. I believe that we should be transparent, and I believe that would be the best to do in the world. But I've also seen the effects our openness have been outside our borders. This is not a big issue in Norway. People understand that this is not dangerous. There's not a big focus on this. I think we know every week around 400 people are dying in our elderly care centers because they are at that stage of life. So that some of those who get the vaccines die, that's just in a way natural. But when you see how exaggerated these news gets in other countries and in other media, and how this might give the vaccine critics and those who have anxieties against the vaccination, give them a push, and the conspiracy thinking, you sometimes think that we have to work on the matureness of also getting those open data, because if they are misused, it creates fear. And that's why we are trying to work very hard to get the focus that this is not a problem. It's who we have vaccinated, not the vaccine, that has created these data.
I want to talk to you about Kovacs. Norway is a huge supporter of Kovacs, and that is the program that aims to distribute the COVID vaccine equitably around the world. When will low and middle income countries start getting the vaccine under the COVAX scheme, and which country or which countries will get it first?
Well, I can't say which countries will give it first or who will, but we hope that the funding and the system now, and especially with the new American administration who has come back to the World Health Organization, who have said they will fund, and the Congress says they will fund the COVAX and do their part of the participation. I think we will see that this gives even a bit better focus. The distribution is the World Health Organization and Gavi and other organizations that will be in the lead of. They know which mechanisms to use and how to use it. What we really need is, of course, also the type of vaccines that can be used in countries that don't have the same, cooling systems that, for example, the Pfizer vaccine needs, because this is a vaccine that really needs a quite sophisticated distribution system and very strong, cooling systems to make sure that the vaccine is not ruined. That means that when we are getting vaccines that don't need the same type of chill down or freezing level, I think it will be easier to also get the distribution to other countries. But it's the World Health Organization that and the mechanisms, of course, is trying to get it as evenly distributed as the problem needs. But it needs more funding. We need more funding for it, and I'm very happy that the US now is on board.
Given that the US is now on board, when do you think you might be able to, or COVAX might be able to start giving vaccines out? I've read in a few places and heard that the goal was February. Is that still realistic?
Yes, it's still our aim and goal. We just need to get first vaccines, make sure that the systems for distributions are there, and so we still hope for February.
With this program, there is somewhat of a moral dilemma in certain parts of the world. Now, I know you have said, Norway has said, that you will give vaccines to people in poorer countries while simultaneously vaccinating your own people. But what would you say to some countries who say, no, our priority is to vaccinate our own people first, and we're not going to give up some of our vaccines for people in other countries?
Well, I think we have to understand that we are in this together, that the effects on our economy from a large pandemic like this is not just the effects of the internal economy in countries, but the whole global. We are in this together. We have to find solutions. And that's why we believe that we should also give away some of the vaccines. And that's why we're also working with the European Union to find a platform for doing that beside the COVAX mechanisms that we are funding. But of course, in the early days, I think all countries will start to vaccinate their most vulnerable, because I don't think you will get support. I think I have to be honest, you will not get support in any country if you are giving away vaccines and people and the most vulnerable is not vaccinated. But we hope that we will finish the vaccination of the most vulnerable in Norway by March.
By March, okay. I want to switch gears to talk about climate change now, Prime Minister. You are committed to cutting emissions and to boosting green growth. You want to be seen as a champion of climate change. Yet Norway is also the largest oil producer in Western Europe. Can you be both?
Well, I believe you can be both. But I think we all have to understand that we see that the future does not have the large place for fossil fuels, but it will have a place for fossil fuels in the first decades that we see. That means that there will be a need for fossil fuels before we are down to the low emission economy in the world. And of course, it's important to understand that the Paris Agreement is based on every country doing something about their emissions. So Norway's responsibility is to cut our emissions from oil and gas production, not to stop French people for driving a fossil fuel car. So we are taking a very clear look at how can we make sure that we stop emissions from the production of CO2, no, production of oil and gas in our country. It's a bit like I could say that any car producer that still uses a traditional engine that uses fossil fuel is responsible for that car's emission. I think we sometimes have to be realistic on this, but we see a future where oil and gas will have less importance in our economy. We are working on our transformation from that into other businesses, and hopefully we will see that we can use some of our resources like natural gas into hydrogen production in the future if we can take care of if we can store the CO2.
I want to turn our attention to the elections. You have elections coming up in Norway in September this year. Now, the Labour Party, which used to be neck and neck with the Conservative Party, your party has slipped to third place, while the Centre Party has moved up to second place in the polls. What do you make of this change?
Well, I think I'm in office for now into my 8th year. And of course, there will always be a discussion on should we change, is the strategies from the government the right ones? And there's always a lot of people who say that the government haven't seen my needs. I'm critical. And the Centre Party has been good at mobilizing some of those views and voices around the country that maybe feel that the development is going too fast, that changes are too rapid in our society, and that they might want to slow the transformation process. And my job is to try to say that we need change to make sure that we take care of what's the best sides of our society for the future. If you stand still and others move ahead, you in fact are moving backwards. But this is a Norwegian political debate. The Labour parties probably have been responsible also in government for a long time, and they have maybe not been able to appeal at the same time to those who are feeling that the world is moving too fast these days.
Speaking of change and speaking of elections, we all watched the inauguration a few days ago in the US, and we have President Biden in the White House. What are your hopes for how Norway-US relations might change in the next 4 years?
Well, first of all, I would like to say on the most important issue between the US and Norway, the security issues, we've had a good cooperation with the Trump administration, with the US. It's a long-standing relations that has not really changed. In some ways, it's been enhanced. But of course, we have also an interest in the international agenda outside our security issues. And of course, we hope to see a re-emerging U.S. on international trade, rule of law. Of course, what we are happy to see is that they are going back into the Paris Agreement, that they are entering into World Health Organization, issues that Norway is very hard working on and are interested in getting to function. Because smaller countries like Norway, we need more predictability in the international world. We need the rule of law to be there, not the mightiest in economic or military power to rule, and that's what we hope to see. Stability is of the things we really would enjoy, but both businesses, I think, and politicians need. In an insecure world, stability in the international sphere will be good.
You've talked a lot about protecting the oceans, how important that is to you, and you've talked very often about being on the water, learning to fish as a little girl. You've said now that oceans can help us weather existential threats like climate change, of course, but also COVID-19. How so?
Well, first of all, the most the place in the world where we know the least about is the oceans. We don't know what type of medicines we can get out of the oceans. We know that there are large possibilities in the future for the rich resources that we have in the oceans. That's why we have to take care of it. That's why it can help on medicines. It can help on developing new technology from it. It's very important aspect. And then, of course, for example, eating fish has a much less climate footprint than eating meat. That means that if we can manage to harvest our fishery resources sustainably, the reports of the high-level panel that I've been co-chairing, the scientific reports show that we can increase consumption of fish quite a lot if we are managing our resources better. And I think this is important issues in the future because we get healthier. The public health will be better off eating fish compared to eating too much meat. And the protein of fish also secures us better against diseases than meat does. It's a lot of issues around that. I mean, the story, of course, in Norway, we have this saying that you have to take codfish liquid. I'm not sure the English word of it, but we drink that in the wintertime every month without an R because we have too little sun, so we need the vitamin D, and we know that this really helps on public health. So there's a lot more to get from that, and 20% of the climate change can be helped by having better ocean policies.
Prime Minister, a lot has been said and written about leadership during the pandemic, and that countries that have women leaders, such as your country, have done better in managing the pandemic, or in some cases, like New Zealand, almost doing away with the virus. What do you think is common between the way you have led your country and the way other women leaders have led their countries through the pandemic?
Well, I sometimes say that it might not be the fact that we are women as leaders, but the fact that we are elected, even though we are women, might have something in common in our countries. I know that in Norway, the fact that Norwegians are having a lot of faith in their political institutions, that they follow when we say we have to work from home, we have to lower the level of activity, people are following up, doing more social distancing. You don't have to, use forbid it, to use the police force. People are working in solidarity with each other. And even though I would like to say that's, of course, because of women leaders, but I would like to say that maybe it's easier to become, as a woman, a leader in that type of societies that are led by example and not by what I would call testosterone politics, in a way of who you elect also comes out of what type of political environment you have.
We've all had to make some serious adjustments to the way we live and work over the last year. Out of these changes we've had to make, is there any one change you would like to hold on to as we come out of the pandemic, hopefully over the next couple of months?
Well, even though we are all very tired of looking at each other through a video camera and a lens, I think we should keep some of this. My country has been speedy digitalized by this. We see that we can work differently. That will lead to more efficiency. It leads to more participation by some groups, less participation by others. So we have to make sure that we don't get new differences by it. But of course, it does, and it has been a revolution. We never thought we would get every school to be able to teach from when the children are at home. But I mean, I closed the Norwegian schools at the 12th of March last year. The first teaching programs were up in the morning at the 13th, and everybody over the weekend would get a program, meet their teachers. We have a lot of equipment, and we had a lot of, so we have distribution of technology in our society, but the use has not been the same. And I think that is something really we have leaped forward into the digital world.